Good morning. The Committee of the Whole is called to order. My colleagues, we ended with Senator Tyree yesterday. We will now begin with Madam Speaker. And if I'm correct, you do have a motion you'd like to make, ma'am?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and my colleagues. Good morning. I'd like to substitute the bill. There's a version that I've passed out. It's don't use the italicized version. It should say as substituted on the floor in regular font. And the substitute version changes what used to be a transfer authority to an outright authorization to use $50 million from the general fund. It also gives in a more detail the authorized expenses that these monies can be used for, to include safety and security, food, water, sheltering, health and medical, energy, communications, transportation, and hazardous materials. Individual assistance is specifically authorized for use of funds appropriated herein, and the governor shall coordinate with FEMA and the American Red Cross to compile survey data for the individual assistance determinations. The governor shall further disperse $100,000 from the funds to each mayor to be used for any of those above listed authorized expenses. And then there are reporting requirements that I've added to the bill in sections 2 and 3. It just pretty much says that of course we're trying to get reimbursed for as many expenses as possible. So we're just, when they give us their monthly reports on these expenditures, we want to see how it ties into reimbursement. And on section 3, it says such reimbursements shall be, if reimbursed, shall be deposited into the general fund. And I might add the word potential reimbursements, because as we heard, some of these, we're inevitable, may not be. But well, I don't need to add that word. It's the reimbursements, if they're made, they will be deposited. But the gist of this is pretty much a recommendation from the governor and her team, and based on yesterday's discussions with everyone. And I know that we're all trying to get on the same page to get assistance out faster, to get response and recovery faster. Some of the teams from GPA, GWA said they're not really calling, or maybe it was Mr. Esteves, it's like we're not even in recovery mode yet, we're still in incident response. We're still in the incident at this point. And I think the people are really feeling it. So the whole gist of the bill was remove any impediment for the governor to use money. If we can get reimbursed by FEMA, awesome, excellent. But regardless, it has to move fast as possible. We heard the pleas of the mayor. I think you all have individual stories of disaster, and every family is impacted, every single business, everyone, and some in such horrible ways. So yeah, I want to thank all of those who really are doing the responding. This is the least that we could do, I feel, is just give the governor the flexibility to use the money as fast as possible. And then we've heard some concerns that the purchase orders aren't going out fast enough. So I hope that with the presence of all the team here and all the representatives from the different agencies, that those issues that Mayor Alec brought up on behalf of all the mayors and all the people, that we resolve those, that we get the purchase orders faster, we get them the heavy equipment, we get them the chainsaws, we get the people water and everything that we can possibly do. And as I told you in the beginning, I introduced this at the request of the governor. I am substituting it also at her request. She feels that this language will be more flexible and allow her to use it more intently for the purposes listed here. So I want to thank my colleagues for considering this. Thank you.
There's a motion, my colleagues, to accept the substitute Bill 127-37 COR as substitute on the floor. Are there any objections to the substitute?
Point of inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So yesterday, as we were discussing the original bill, there was some confusion as to whether it was the current budget allotments, the current budget for the governor that exists, and was it an additional 50 million, taking it to 100 million. So now just I want to make that clear that we're talking about what's contained in the current Budget Act
That's correct.
And it would be the 50 million. This would not take it as an additional 50 million. This is the flexibility to use what's currently available within up to.
That's correct, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the
Thank
clarification.
you. There being no objection, motion moves on the acceptance of the substitute. I will begin the question with Senator Barnett, and I will save the speaker to be last so that she can close up on the bill and then rise to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of just to expand on the comments of the substitute bill's author talking about reimbursements. I did have some questions for Mr. Esteves. Sir, I mean, so much of what we're trying to do here is contingent and dependent upon us making good choices and good expenditures that are going to be held up through the reimbursement process. Is that correct?
Test. So just to let you know, for any expenditures related to the response.
I'm sorry, could you just state your name for the record?
Sorry. Charles Esteves, Administrator, Office of Civil Defense. So just to let you know that any expenditures related to the response, we do it apart from any sort of reimbursement. A lot of these decisions are made for, first of all, the priority of life-saving and life-sustaining. While it is good to get reimbursed by the federal government for expenditures we take, especially when it comes to emergency protective measures, right now, whatever we can do to help ourselves is basically what we're going to use the monies for. For a full listing of what's potentially reimbursable, there's a good guide out there. It's the Public Assistance Program Policy Guide, version 4. And if you go, I think it's page 106, emergency protective measures, a lot of that covers everything from overtime to feeding, for sheltering, wraparound services, medical services. So generally what's reimbursable is anything outside of normal operations. Damages to facilities from the Typhoon Mawar. There is a bunch of things that the federal government can reimburse, anything from soil erosion to sand. And so it's a matter of determining first what the damages are, paying it up front, and then working through the public assistance program to get those reimbursements.
Right. Yeah,
And,
so, go ahead.
and just let you know that when we talk recovery, after all the lights are on and everyone has flowing water, recovery is a long process. It's up to 5 years, and that's because that's the appropriation for whatever we get, whatever the federal government gets for the disaster relief fund. So this public assistance program, we have to ensure that we do the work and complete the work within a 5-year time frame. So some of the legacy events that Mr. Carlson was talking about, we're still recovering from MANCUT. COVID is ongoing for public assistance. We still have WUTIP out there. And so we do have a pretty robust public assistance office that they're still working to close out projects from past events. So I could tell you that recovery is going to be a long, very long process, especially for an event like this. We may exceed the 5 years and have to request for an extension for some of these public assistance programs, especially considering that they, for the most part, they follow our local laws in terms of procurement, especially when it comes to facility rebuilding, reconstruction, or whatever the actual damage is.
Right, but I think the intent of this body is to give the governor the authority to spend money with the intention of having it be reimbursed by FEMA, whether it's at the 75-25 or the 90-10 split. And so I guess my line of questioning is going to kind of be relative to these legacy issues that Mr. Fenton and Mr. Carlson had brought up, this difficulty that we have had as a government in trying to get these reimbursements. And I know you mentioned WUTIP and MANCUT, but I would say that there are more recent examples of questionable expenditures that have been made in a disaster, namely the COVID-19 pandemic, right? And so we don't have to go as far back as MANCUT and WUTIP to look at maybe what I would call cautionary tales. So in proceeding with this substitute measure, Right, we do want to speed up the, and I know we're not in the recovery yet, that we're in the incident response, is that what you call it?
Yeah, so the playbook that we used for this event was not so much the Guam Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, but is the 2018 Catastrophic Plan. And so our catastrophic plan, which was done jointly with FEMA, is actually an annex to the region's all hazards plan. And so right now it's 3 phases. It's pre-incident, and then recovery. So right now we are still in a sub-phase of, we're still in incident response. And it's only once we stabilize water and power, and in the plan it lists these very specific critical areas that, you know, the governor has also made a priority. It's only once we've able to stabilize these critical resources and infrastructure that we can start moving towards the recovery. Right now, the people that FEMA has on the ground is specifically for incident response, and also to establish the individual assistance program. After that, that's when the public assistance folks can come in, set up the office, do the in-brief with government agencies and eligible nonprofits to say, hey, this is the scope of work that you identified, the damages, this is what we need to do over the next 5 years to, you know, basically recover and then get the reimbursements that we put in for.
Right, I guess what I kind of wanted to ask was, and I kind of asked Mr. Fenton last night, how do we avoid mistakes that we made in the past that have, you know, led to maybe non-reimbursements or outright denials of claims? And so I brought up or I'm now bringing up the QFACs, the quarantine facilities, right? And we know there was an audit about that, and we know that it might have been procured questionably and whatnot. So how do we, if you could just go over what you felt were the issues and concerns with that, and how do we avoid making these same mistakes as we move to respond to this incident and then eventually recover from it in a way that doesn't jeopardize the people's money?
Yeah, so just to let you know that the 250,000 that went pretty quick, with the 3.5 million that Lester's you know, managed to find and get for us, which is, you know, I'm just gonna say it's you know, it's imaginary money right now, right? We don't have this emergency fund that we can use. So with what Lester was able to provide for us, we put the exact line item that kind of matches what's exactly in the public assistance program. So as a budget line item, we have $1.5 million, I believe, for emergency protective measures. And in that, you know, we are tying the actual expenditure to the potential reimbursement, right? So we're going line by line to determine, you know, that, hey, we're saying we're spending this, and here is the direct tie into the public assistance program.
So was this a line-by-line process that you just described, was this followed in the pandemic at the onset?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, it was a very novel type of event, and even with that, FEMA was, you know, they changed their policies for public assistance. You know, for example, the CARES Act, you know, you heard from, you know, Mr. Fenton that we cannot use the public assistance program to reimburse federal dollars, and that's an example of one of those changes. Additionally, there were public assistance that was pushed down from the president that we didn't request for, such as the full activation of the National Guard. So there were a lot of really novel things that people had to do from the onset of that, only to ensure that, you know, life-saving, life-sustaining. But an event like this is something that we've planned for. It's something that we've rehearsed through exercises. It's very different than I think what was happening during COVID.
Right, and I know it was also novel in that the traditional way we respond to a disaster, and in the case it was a pandemic, was like you said, right? Traditionally we respond with a line-by-line itemization to make sure that we're crossing all the I's, dotting the T's. But with COVID, what I thought was novel was that you had individuals who were not connected with the Office of Civil Defense or the Guam Homeland Security out here procuring services that, you know, led to some of these questionable expenditures. Would you say that's accurate?
Well, for this event, and, you know, during COVID, when I was there, we procured what we were told to procure. We got our quotes, we went through the bidding process. So even though this is an emergency, we're still doing our due diligence to get as many quotes as we can, to source as many vendors, ensure that there's equitable, at least solicitation for whatever services and products that we're trying to get.
So are you saying that that wasn't the case when we responded in the pandemic?
I just know that during the pandemic, whatever was sourced through our office, we were told to source from both the GAR and from the governor. Like I said, we got our quotes, we sent it out for bid, especially for the quarantine facilities and isolation facilities that Civil Defense procured. So,
Right. So I guess going back to the theme of cautionary tale, right? Because I know you're tenured, you're experienced, you know what you're doing, you're very qualified. What would you advise us as a policymaking, lawmaking body to kind of look out for red flags that were that came up during the pandemic that we should watch out for in this instance? Because, right, we want to make sure that every dollar that we spend, we can at the very least get back 75 cents from the federal government and not end up, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars or even millions of dollars on expenses that will have no chance of being reimbursed for.
and I could tell you our office is, we have good record keeping. We're ensuring that every expenditure, the file is maintained, paper the file, everything from email traffic, phone records of when we call these vendors. And, and from your time before the legislature with all the sunshine requests, our files, especially for procurement, were very detailed. And so we have that same record keeping here. GSA is actually in our office, BBMR is in our office. So there's, when it comes to the procurement, we want to make sure that we have all the necessary people in there to ensure that we don't have trouble paying vendors and we don't have trouble, there's no procurement violations.
Right, and so I think, and you're right, coming before the legislature, coming from the media, I think it was very clear that the problem that we had was that you had people who were dealing in areas way outside of their expertise. And I'll just say it was the former legal counsel of the governor. I felt carried too much weight and too much power and influence to make decisions that we ended up having to foot the bill for. So, that being said, are we now in a place with personnel who have maybe more experience to navigate this type of territory?
I would say for this event, yes, I'm very confident. Yeah, with GSA and BBMR in our office, I'm very confident that any expenditure we make is procured in accordance with all applicable laws and rules, right, with the GAR, the GCA and the GAR. And I can tell you that every emergency, Lester he's basically our watchdog to ensure that every cent that we spend we're spending it based off of what we told him we're spending it on.
Because I'm sure you understand that we're in this position where it's very precarious what we're about to do and giving the governor this authority to spend upwards of $50 million. I kind of wanted to pivot maybe just a little bit, and because we had asked Mr. Fenton yesterday if $50 million was enough.
Yeah, so, he talked about the Pung Songwa expenditures, and this is on the FEMA Disaster Declaration website. So talking about Pung Songwa expenditures, and this is just public assistance. So this doesn't include the direct federal assistance that FEMA gave to us that we had to pay our 25% cost share or whatever the cost share was at the time. But it was about $12 million, and that's just for debris and emergency protective measures. And then it was about $42 million for categories C through G, which covers facilities and parks and recreation and other categories there, dams, roads, bridges. Now you take that to today's dollars, that's like 90-some million dollars, and he was talking upwards to, over $100 million. That's because he had the direct federal assistance money. So $50 million it's a good starting point. And at some point, we probably will have to come back and ask for more to basically restore government facilities to pre-event conditions, incident conditions, and then seek that reimbursement. Especially if we are using Pung So Wah as the benchmark event. And so just to put it in perspective, we've had other presidential disasters, major disaster declarations from Pung So Wah to today. But Pung So Wah was the last event that we had individual assistance. We requested for individual assistance for Dolphin, Mangkhut, and Wu Tip. And we were denied individual assistance because the amount of damages that was sustained throughout the island did not meet the threshold, the per capita threshold that FEMA, when they do their assessment. So the fact that we got individual assistance, the fact that we got it fast, kind of shows the amount of damages sustained to the island.
Right. Yeah. So Mr. Esteves, if you could just clarify, when you say that the amount of money we spent on Pung So Wah in 2023 dollars is equal to
93.53.
93.53 million. Now, is that our 75% or 90%?
That's
over.
Yeah, that's
Overall,
100. Yeah.
okay. So in your opinion, you said that there will probably come a time when we'll be asked again to replenish to whatever funding. Can you give us like a ballpark? So we got 50 mil on the table now. Like how much more do you think would be necessary? But not to restore us to where we were pre-incident, but to restore us to a better place that maybe we should have been pre-incident.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't have that figure. Assessments are still ongoing right now. You know, the fact that we ended the actual incident, the threat, and went into the weekend, Memorial Day weekend, did not help at all, right? So government agencies are still doing their damage assessments, and these are damage assessments that we also do turn into FEMA as well, especially if we require direct federal assistance to return these facilities to normal operations if we find it critical for, like I said, life-saving or life-sustaining.
Just last point here. Are you here to stay for a while? Because like I said, I feel like you're trusted, you're tenured, you're experienced, and part of why you ran into so much trouble last time was that, you know, maybe you weren't given the authority that you were entitled to. So are you here to stay for the duration of this incident response and recovery to make sure that we're signing off on things that we're supposed to sign off on?
Yes. So, you know, I was in Kansas on military training for a year, but I've been back since last year, July. I did go on military orders for a minute, but the governor recalled me since last Tuesday, so here I am.
Well, thank you again for your service, Mr. Esteves, and your candor and honesty. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Just a reminder that this is only one round, and try to keep your questions to the event, Mawar. And amendments, everything all wrapped up in one, okay? Amendments, comments, everything. Senator Parkinson, do you have anything? None. Senator Duenas, do you have anything?
Due to responsibility, Mr. Chairman, I just have a few questions and maybe a comment. So, Lester, I'd like to start with you. Are you comfortable with this arrangement, as we've clarified that this is basically the $50 million that more than likely can be realized in terms of how we're going through this fiscal year?
Yes, I am, sir.
Okay. I'm going to kind of move over to Charles after this, but I think that, and in some communications that I've had with the mayors in specific, is really first and foremost the utilization of their budget. I think they've exhausted pretty much what they've got, or at least what they've pushed out. But it's the procurement issue and the ability to kind of push that down. Do you see that issue?
With all due respect to Mayor Alec, last night I mentioned, I think, 7 different villages that proactively on May 22nd and May 23rd initiated purchase orders for heavy equipment, which were, as of yesterday, were posted. In other words, they're cleared, they're ready to give to the contractor to come to the village and perform the services. They have a significant amount of ARP money on top of what is appropriated, right? So how they end up as a group allocating to the 19 villages is an internal thing. I think what I heard yesterday was the only thing that they're asking from you guys is maybe don't put a limit on purchase orders, because if I only have $100,000, I can't spend more than that. If it's $25,000, that means I have to issue maybe 3 purchase orders. I think that's the only thing that he asked. So again, he did make mention of a desire, I think, for the EOC, Mr. Esteves' shop, to do the procurement for the mayors.
Yeah, that's kind of the transition that I'm trying to make here.
Yeah,
So I'm just,
but I know for a fact that they're capable of doing it. I'm copied on every request to use ARP money, just going back to the earlier question from Senator Barnett. I'm responsible for ensuring that the use of ARP money is eligible. If I find that the request is not eligible, I deny it. I approved Mr. Esteves' budget, the 3.5, after seeing it and asking for a few revisions. So he has a working budget, which I believe, as he mentioned, covers the major categories, and in other subcategories he has attachments with more details. I looked over that very thoroughly to ensure that it met the immediate need. So we do have eyes on what's going on, and the Mayor's Council can issue their own purchase orders. That's with funds that they have available to them. Should this bill pass, there will be additional funds made available to them for recovery. There shouldn't be an issue with the Mayor's Council continuing to do what they have been doing and not relying on the EOC when they have the infrastructure to do it themselves.
okay. Charles, you concur with that?
Yeah, so just to let you know some of the I want to say limitations that we had coming out of this, at least the actual threat, was the ability to issue out purchase orders over the weekend. So we did assist the mayor in getting purchase orders, at least for heavy equipment rental. We did the purchase orders for their safety supplies and equipment, some of the supplies they needed for debris management. And so we definitely have assisted them in emergency procurement. However, a lot of the mayors, before the event, they used whatever funding they could to protect their own villages. And so, to Lester's point, we're here to assist them. They're very busy doing what they have to do in the villages, and so they have the staff to procure as well, and we are another body to help them with that procurement.
I was going to say, in the event that there's a middle here, maybe one representation that, several have been able to push through their purchase orders, but maybe in the totality, there's any issues. I just wanted to get it from you that if it came down to it, I mean, Charles, I've seen you in action before, and I know that when those requests come up, you can make it happen, and I'm just asking you, and so that people of Guam understand that their mayors have the full support of the EOC, saying if there is any glitches in terms of getting those POs processed, that procurement in place, and just letting them get out there and do the work on the ground. I just wanted to make sure we have that on the record.
Yeah, and a lot of the purchase orders, we are, changing the points of contact. For example, the heavy equipment purchase order, we're changing the points of contact from DPW to the mayors. So we're providing these direct services to the Mayor's Council, and basically letting them determine where the best utilization of this equipment will go.
So going back to you, Lester, it seems like you're you're comfortable as long as it filters through you, this discussion on ARP to facilitate.
Yes, and I have been taking a very proactive role ever since COVID with the CARES Act money. The procurements that were discussed didn't go through BBMR, so, just,
I hear you.
So myself and Mr. Byrne have interjected ourselves into the review process, and we will do the same because later on in the bill there's a reporting requirement, and we will make sure that what it is that is contained in the report is money spent on eligible, potentially reimbursable activities.
Yeah, because what I'm thinking is the flexibility here also might give you in working with ASOs before under my time in different leadership positions, you can journal voucher that money over, essentially saying if you replace it under ARP, it's local. It came out of there, but you've replaced it to make it eligible for reimbursement. So I think there's ways to do that, to ensure that there's that accountability.
Yeah, the one thing that Mr. Fenton said very plainly, but he was going to go check his attorney,
Right.
was under the CARES Act, we did get, like the traveling nurses, we did get reimbursement for that, but he's adamant, and Mr. Byrne is just as equally adamant that the law allows for us to use the state and local fiscal recovery fund money for disaster relief and to get it reimbursed. So we're trying to nail that down, but Mr. Fenton adamantly said no. So it might take a while, and it might end up that he's right, and we're just wishful thinking. But we will make sure that the reports that this body has asked us to provide and that we have provided on the 5th of the month in the object category, expenditure, encumbrance, and balance. We'll continue to do that type of work with the additional columns of eligibility, because I think, Mr. Esteves, there's categories of eligibility, right?
Yes.
So what we would probably end up doing is having something on the bottom where A, B, C, D, E, F, and then a column that this expense is eligible under category C. So that way you guys understand that the funds are being used in accordance with identified eligible activities that we hope will satisfy the public, number one, but also facilitate the reimbursement.
Yeah. In any case, we'll probably, if it comes down to it, have to go up to Congress, which is something we should do anyways, I think. If it comes down to that.
I have no problem with that, sir.
Yeah. Going back to you, Charles, I think that kind of just finishing up with you, we're authorizing individual assistance, but right now, what is the activity with FEMA in terms of everything, the requests that have been put in, and those things that we actually have on the ground right now, water, food supplies? Bob talked yesterday about transitioning, going temporarily with MREs and then going over to hot meals and vendors that they're getting, so that if that's covered and going out, I mean, we can use this money for other things that are more pressing.
Yeah. So what I can say right now is that just to kind of explain the process. So before we can make any requests to FEMA, we have to first exhaust all on-island capabilities. And so the process in the EOC is our response activity coordinators. They receive these requests from the different agencies on the actual need, whether that's from the Mayor's Council of Guam or that's internal to Gov Guam in terms of vehicle support, personnel support, whatever they need. So we try to source first internally. If we do not have the resource internally, then we work towards emergency procurement. If we are unable to for whatever reason, so say lack of vendors, lack of supplies, that's when we actually make the resource request through FEMA. And then FEMA mission assigns those resources. So the distribution center, everything in it, we have to make sure that we have exhausted all available means to try to get those types of resources before FEMA can start releasing any sort of resource from the distribution center, such as food and water. And just to let you know that the food and water they give, these are only, short-term kind of, I don't want to say Band-Aid, but it's only short-term support. Even our volunteer organizations active in disasters, they have limited resources, so they can only feed for a certain amount of time. A good example is during Mangkhut, when the Tier 2 shelter opened up in Estumbo, it was the government of Guam that paid for the long-term feeding of all of those residents at Estumbo. And so FEMA right now, they're trying to help us kind of with immediate needs, but eventually they will leave, and then we will be responsible for ensuring that the continued life-sustaining activities for people, for example, that have lost their homes, or trying to help them to seek shelter. So,
Moving over to shelter, I remember when I was at Guam Housing, we facilitated the release of tents and coolers and things, basically a full package of being able to shelter in place. A lot of people don't want to leave their property, and I'm still getting that report as well. So do we have those supplies on the ready and for distribution to folks who want to work on rebuilding their lives next to their home while setting up their 3, 4, 5-man tents with all the equipment and associated with it so they can survive the weather right now while they stay on their property?
yeah, so some of those things like cots and tarps we're working through emergency procurement, in the government of Guam. Like I said, anything that we cannot source here, we will work through FEMA to see if they have it in the distribution center. But yeah, some of those basic needs to at least protect them from the effects of weather, such as tarps, we're working to get them and issue them out to kind of get them out of the shelter. And then with FEMA's roofing project, it's the intent to eventually replace those blue tarps with a Army Corps of Engineer constructed roof with Typhoon clips, and kind of building back better and more resilient.
Okay. Finally, Charles, I'm wrapping up. On the issue of, I remember this during our time, on the issue of the FSM citizens who are non-eligible for some of these programs, are you the point of contact, or is it their consulate for the USAID and those kind of things that can be activated?
Yeah, so for the FSM citizens, and you remember like the last, when you're still at GHC, in the government of Guam, we provided the commodity bags for them and water. To what Mr. Fenton was saying yesterday is that if they have an eligible member in their household, that person can be the one to apply for individual assistance. But that's been a delta, it's been a shortfall. We've brought it up, many times during events that, yes, we have folks that are covered under COFA, and they're already consumers of SNAP. However, how about the COFA folks that are not on SNAP? They're not eligible for individual assistance to replace any food loss. And so that's the number that we need. I did give the FSM consulate, they did request for Mr. Fenton's email address, so I'm pretty sure that they're going to be reaching out to kind of determine, if not through FEMA, what DOI can provide as well.
But the International Organization of Assistance, USAID, that is being activated as well as much as possible?
That I don't know. I do know that the volunteer organizations, they're assisting to kind of meet that short need.
Can you run that up the chain, just to make sure with your partners and the like? Because I know that we were able to secure some of that through Palau, I believe, before last time, with them making the request to USAID. And that is the international organization, as you know,
yeah,
outside of the
and they have their Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance as well. So we'll go ahead and ask that question.
Well, good luck, Charles. I have confidence in the work that you're doing, and I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with this idea, particularly knowing that we're basically moving the budget that we have and something that we would have to do anyways in order to be able to get this assistance out. Final question, maybe you and Lester. Essentially, right now, the agencies are using whatever budgets they have outside of what their operational and of course, their salaries and benefits operations in order to be able to do what they could do just on the front line right now. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so like for example, Guam Fire Department, Guam Police Department, they're, they have what's normal operations, but obviously there's a lot of activities that they are doing beyond normal operations, and so they, are working to use whatever funds they have until we can get some sort of emergency type of appropriation.
So Lester, basically this is what's kind of happening right now anyways. You got to get that money out there and they're just using within their budget authority, yeah?
Yes, sir.
All right, guys, thanks a lot. Appreciate your being here. Appreciate you, being very frank and straightforward on the answers, and look forward to getting that assistance out there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Minority Leader, Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. Lester, you had mentioned earlier, I guess in the procurement process or in the process of the emergency procurement, that you had to somehow use the word interject. Participation in being able to be a part of the procurement process is, I find that kind of interesting, because does that tell me that during the emergency operations you had no official role?
Let me clarify that, sir.
Okay.
What I meant was, with ARP money, requests come into my office for drawdowns for certain items. So we review the eligibility,
Right.
and then clear or deny. This time around, we're making different and hopefully more productive use of government and Guam employees. So I have 2 of my staff up at the EOC, and Mr. Byrne also asked for 2 of his staff, one from payroll and one from accounting, so, in addition to the GSA personnel, which basically fall under Mr. Byrne. So we are stepping up the presence only to do 2 things: to ensure that we facilitate this, but also to ensure that we do it correctly.
Appreciate it, because I would highly encourage that, please, for that. I just found that a little bit disturbing, because when I ran the operation, I looked to BBMR and DOA to handle that side of the house, with regard to the operations or the financing, especially, and the administration part. I looked to them, and I would highly encourage that. Secondly, when we're looking at the bill here, and this is based on, I guess, the conversation that we had yesterday with what we have in our coffers right now, what financing or what monies we have and what we can anticipate pre-storm. Let's take that everything happened after the storm up until right now. We're not getting any revenues anywhere whatsoever. Does this conversation include, and as far as this money, that monies that had been already appropriated a couple weeks ago? There was 2 different appropriations that were made, albeit they were with excess funds. Was that included in this budget to be considered?
So thank you for that question, because I did want to speak about that. The last CRER that we provided to you guys, which included the passage of LEAP and some money for the extension of the gas tax, resulted in us having a negative $7 million. Speaker loves to hear snapshots, so today's the 31st. This is fluid because, you know, not all of the funds have been remitted due to, you know, banking issues and merchant issues and other things like that. But as of right now, we're $7.6 million short in what we anticipated for the month of May. So we have a lot of work to do on our end to keep the government operations running, to ensure that the response efforts are funded, and to prioritize what it is that we're doing with the revenues that we do have.
Okay, because then that's what was bothering me about this whole thing, that whole conversation was absent two different appropriations. I know that this body has no power to be able to direct monies outside of our resources. However, I'm going to use this as an opportunity. Would it help if those two specific appropriations were actually transferred over, because it could be, because it is eligible under ARP, thus freeing up that shortfall or bringing the money in so that it can be utilized? We had this discussion about being able to shift monies over so that we can make sure that it's a local, you know, we're using local money to be able to get the reimbursements from this. If we can shift that money over from LEAP and the gas tax over to the ARP, freeing up that funding necessity from the local fund so that it can be utilized here and then get the reimbursements there. Let's try. I know we can't have that conversation, or can we legislate it? But I'm going to ask, please, as the representative to the governor, if you can go back and ask her to be able to do something like this. This will tremendously help and free up monies we need now. $7.9 million short. I'm afraid that even if we were to say yes to this bill and it was to be passed into law, that we may not realize a lot of this stuff because of all the other debt we have we're, like you said, we're $7.9 million short. But if we can free that up, we can free up some money, right? Am I right in that?
I will ask her.
Thank
She
you.
already committed to add money to the LEAP. I will ask her whether or not she is amenable to increasing that, therefore reducing the government portion.
Appreciate it. Now, last question. I think yesterday there was we spent hours and hours and hours yesterday. A lot of it was, in my opinion, it's really not necessary for the conversation that we need to have today. Was there anything as a result of yesterday that slowed down any operations? Did the operations stop yesterday because of what happened in this floor yesterday?
From BBMR standpoint, no, sir,
How about from the
because
response?
we have no power.
How about from the response standpoint? Charles, was there anything that yesterday stopped all operations yesterday because of what was happening?
Yeah, not so much stopped. Like I said, the issue that we've had that just kind of slowed our ability to respond was contacting vendors over the weekend.
Okay, but it had nothing to do with what was going on here.
Yeah.
Okay, so today, if we can get out here in an hour and let you guys go on your way, we're good to go.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to assure you guys and the public of that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome, Minority Leader Senator Blas. Senator Jesse Lujan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, gentlemen. Mr. Carlson, I know this was asked earlier, and I asked this question again yesterday, but let me ask it again so I can better understand and formulate my questions from here. The governor has already authorized through 5 GCA, subsection 22402, transfer authority of 15%. Is that correct?
No, sir. No? The 22402 is the emergency declaration, the $250,000.
250, okay.
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
Okay, with her transfer authority, what does that grant her as well? Just that, 250,000?
No, when she declares an emergency,
Yeah.
so I couldn't do anything, she actually penned the emergency. Then we loaded the 250,000 and made it available to civil defense. What I was talking about yesterday was her transfer authority. The 50 million does not exist, and I went through a litany of
Okay.
stuff basically saying that currently the only amount that would be available is 11,900,000, which is 93.45% payroll. So that's why we're talking about a
Yeah.
paradigm shift in where we're going.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because yes. So last night you said the availability of the funds that she would have, again based on transfer authority, is 11,924,089, right?
Good memory.
Right? Yeah. There we go. Okay. So that being said, if she were to use, as you had mentioned last night as well, if she were to use that funding for such, the government could be facing payless paydays, right?
There will be trouble.
Okay. So, to authorize 50 million, doesn't that make it even more troublesome?
If we are able to recover and get commerce back to normal, please remember that during COVID, there were a lot of folks that thought that we had a looming fiscal cliff. We, on the other hand, said, no, our own economy is strong. And we continue to record revenues in excess of adopted levels all the way up until the storm. So we're looking at facilitating the response efforts to get back to that level of operations, normalcy, if that's even applicable, where we were getting monies over what it was that we anticipated. So yes, I believe that once we get to that point in time, we will actually still see revenues that exceed what it was that the budget and the appropriation allocation report actually the distribution. So yes, I think so, sir.
Okay. Now let me ask this question, because we had funding, of course, for the pandemic, for COVID. Now, likewise with FEMA and their reimbursement and all that. And we were still, as was mentioned earlier, civil defense, that we still have some programs basically that we're covering through the funding through COVID. Now, how do we move forward and not commingle these funds, or can they be? Is there an exception made for us based on still being able to use some of that COVID funding versus now that we're in this situation, and how does that work? We still have money that we have from the pandemic, and so how are those two monies commingled?
They're not commingled. If there's a possibility of being able to take for, remember this is a good example. The $100 monthly electric bill relief that the body passed and then extended. We couldn't use ARP money because COVID didn't cause the oil prices to go up. There has to be a direct correlation for eligibility. So we'll look and see whether or not there are eligible uses that may apply in this case. But you know, even as Mr. Esteves said, we're in an incident stage. You know,
Sure,
it's
sure,
still
sure.
early.
Yeah.
But Senator Lujan, we will be as resourceful as we possibly can. I will take Senator Blas's message back to the governor. I will impart that. And we're not going, if there's a way to be able to reduce and facilitate some of the needed funding with monies that we have already, we'll certainly make that pitch.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering because, again, we're still really working and having some programs regarding the pandemic, and because of what happened, maybe it maybe just exacerbated the problem and made that program even maybe more needed at this point because of the storm, and maybe more people are now eligible because of this. You know what I'm saying? and I'm just wondering, again, the commingling, and then FEMA will come back and say, no, because that was COVID, and now we won't be able to reimburse you for this because you understand what I'm saying, right?
No,
yeah.
Just to be clear, the CARES Act, I went to a National Association of State Budget Officers meeting, and remember when the pandemic hit, it was the mayor of New York City who was all, basically leading the charge, Mayor Cuomo.
Sure.
And anything that New York was doing, everybody was following, right? But they didn't have receipts. They acted, So that incident was unauditable. So, subsequent to that, when they passed the American Rescue Plan, this is subject to audit. So hence, Mr. Byrne and myself scrutinizing all the fund utilizations for eligibility so we don't get dinged. So we will ensure that, whatever is appropriate to leverage, right, is appropriate and not come back and blow back in our face.
Sure. No, again, because that book is not closed yet. That's still an open book in regards to what's happening with still COVID, and now we have this new challenge that we're in. One other question, Mr. Carlson, is this 100,000 appropriate for each mayor? Does that go to each of the 19 municipalities or the mayor's council?
I think my understanding is that it's going to go to each mayor.
Each mayor?
Yes, sir.
Okay, directly to them, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, how soon would that be? Would that 100,000 get to them? And with Mayor Alec yesterday in regards to again being able for them having the monies and be able to again cut the POs, whatever it takes to be able to get that expedited, would that be a faster way to get it done for them?
Actually, I'm going to ask the Mayor's Council to kind of take a step back and look at the resources that they have, the purchasing ability that they have, the fact that those purchase orders come through BBMR and DOA for review for eligibility, and use the resources so that they don't have to wait around for this because they have resources, sir.
Okay. And likewise, doing so as well, that they would definitely would have to report, and then, of course, report back to FEMA and make sure everything, your I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and we're able to get reimbursements for that, right? Yeah. And again, one other thing in regards to the MAGA'HÅGAN having to provide a written report. Now, would that written report be done after every expenditure? So every time you buy something, you have to make a report?
Thank you so much, Senator Lujan. I would like, if I may, to ask that on page 2, line 4, that within 30 days, then starting on line 4, after the end of the month, beginning with May. So we'll give you a report every 30 days. We'll give you a report for what transpired from the last week. Similar to the CRER, where you give me 20 days at the end of the month to get the data. If you guys could afford us that same structure, we would appreciate it, because each transaction, we're talking about, Mr. Esteves will probably tell you, maybe even 100 transactions in maybe one day.
And that's my concern, that you'll be...
Yes, bogged down.
You'll be all at your tables writing your reports out. And again, yes, it's necessary to get the reports, but again, I think what President has been said and what you've been doing maybe would be appropriate in continuing that, following along that line, right?
Yeah, we could probably use the same format that we're using for the ARP reports that we provide, just change the report nominally. But it's still, that report is 5 days at the end of the month, right? The CRER, the Special Revenue Fund reports, are 20 days after. So, if I could get 20 days after, I would really appreciate it, because I still need to be able to work with him, work with Edward, purchase order number, use, blah, 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 blah. It's going to be a rather lengthy, it'll end up being a lengthy report cumulatively.
Okay. Well, Mr. Carlson, thank you very much. Appreciate it, and let's get her done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lujan. Senator Joanne Brown.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you also to our panel that's here. I have to tell you, it was very frustrating yesterday sitting through that whole process of, while I appreciate the briefing on current activities to address recovery, which I know is important to all of us and all of our members in the community, this is kind of like the kind of discussion we should have had yesterday morning. I think it's nice to be new to everything. There was a time we were all younger, and Steve and I used to play softball in front of Adelup. There was a day. We all had our time, those of us that are older. We all had our moment to be new and young and thought we knew everything, and the world and the people of Guam were waiting for us to come along because we had arrived. And I have to tell you, this is one of those moments when the need for experienced individuals that know how to deal with these issues and respond effectively, I think this is one of those moments where we're seeing how critical that need is, so that we can be responsive, and rather than showing just our frustration and our emotion on this issue, can actually get out there and execute what we need to do to help our people. I'm sure if my good colleague from Barrigada, Senator Frank, had to dust off his shoulders and go out there and respond, he would know exactly what to do to move these issues forward. And I hope for those that don't, this is a wonderful opportunity to get the experience so that they'll be in a position, hopefully. I don't think any of us desire typhoons. I mean, I've lived through Pamela too. I wasn't here for Karen. I wasn't born yet. But, I think we all hope this doesn't happen. But if it does, we've in the past had the ability to immediately respond, because we know FEMA's not going to be in place for how many days. No matter what they have stored on Guam in their warehouse, it's going to take them days to get out there and execute what they need to do in the community. And God bless them. We appreciate their support. But we know that the initial few days have to be our ability to respond. Just to follow up on some of the questions of my colleagues, I wanted to ask Mr. Esteves, and I think that's where the need for comfort is, because we don't have a lot, some of us don't, and the administration has not consistently given us a reason to feel a sense of comfort with how funds are being expended because there's been such resistance to doing it. And because of your experience, and we've worked with you, Mr. Esteves, so we have some sense of comfort in your work. But I want to know what's going to be different this time around in facilitating, particularly because we are, we kind of think if we're only using federal funds, well, we need to be extra careful because that's Uncle Sam's money. But we should even be more careful about how we spend our own people's money because it's harder to come by. Our people got to earn that money. So I want to know from you what's going to be different that's going to give our community and our people a sense of comfort that this money that we're going to vote for today to put forth to respond to this emergency is going to go where it needs to go. And there's not going to be any funny business with regards to how it's expended, and that we operate by the rule of law to ensure that the money goes to where it's supposed to go. And for those, if they misspend it, then by all means there should be consequences if they miss public money. So I wanted to ask you that because I think that's a very important concern that I have, and I think a lot of people have in our community.
Yes, so I think some of the ways to prevent that is one, ensuring that whatever monies were given has a direct purpose, an exact, line item budget description of the expenditure. Additionally, what I used to do is I used to footnote when I send up a budget request in previous storms to Lester saying, hey, this is where exactly in the Public Assistance Program Policy Guide where we're going to ask to seek reimbursement. So I used to do that. Additionally, we're housing 7 folks from GSA up at the office and the staff. We want to make sure that whatever we're sending through, normally, we key in the requisitions, they cut the POs, and there's a process there. But with GSA, they're telling us, what the limits are for certain, purchase orders actually going in the system and ensuring that we do not exceed, anything stated in terms of procurement law and procurement rules. And so it's kind of having those people in the same office working together for emergency procurement. I think that's what's going to keep us out of trouble.
Well, and particularly for your office, because, of course, we can look back at the pandemic, but it's not that long ago. I mean, we're a little concerned for those of us that have been at this a while. We were there since there were plastic tables and folding chairs, and that was the whole setup that we had in a rectangle looking at each other. Yes. Before we had all the modern conveniences of communication that, it's not consistently helping us right now. But in that particular case, we all knew that the procurement should have been set up in your office and your operations. And why was that not the case? Because that's automatic. We are responding to an emergency. We're not going through the normal, let's do our thing on the side here, and the governor this, and so that. It's supposed to go through your office. So how do we have comfort this time around that it is going to go through your office and you're not going to be hindered in any way from performing your job and ensuring that, the people are going to get what they need? Because it's already, we share the mayor's frustration. I mean, it's, I don't know anybody who's living in comfort. It's nice we have air conditioning, but I'm going to go home to my bahaki clothes and no power, as a lot of our people are in this situation. So can you elaborate further on how that's going to be addressed differently this time around? Because we're still dealing with the same administration, so what's the difference?
Yeah, so it's having the right people doing, basically overseeing and managing those procurement processes. Very competent, very confident administrative service officer at our shop, very competent personnel from GSA that's located in our shop as well. Basically having that robust finance administration team, I think it's going to help us to ensure that we paper the file and we keep the record keeping. Even when Senator Barnett was over with the media, I basically said to all of them, you don't need to do these formal requests. If you want the information, we'll just email you the information, right? So having that transparency, I think whenever anyone asks for information is the ability to give it to them right when they ask for it, instead of having to wait for these, whatever the time limit for these sunshine requests are. And so I think we've been, at least during COVID, from our office, the record keeping that we've kept, we've been very transparent and we've had it readily available. So I think that's going to provide an additional layer of comfort, knowing that when you request for something, yes, we will have the periodic reporting, but when you request for something, whether it's, daily expenditures, we have it readily available. Additionally, I do want to point out that in the Emergency Operations Center, we've always had a seat for a member for the legislature to sit there, and basically just kind of find out how operations are going, any sort of specific requests for information. They can ask any of the response activity coordinators. Yeah, so it's just not an invitation. We've always had a seat. So anytime you want to send someone up there to get information, they have a seat inside that EOC, the same with any other government agency.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, I understand our efforts of our speaker to move this forward. I hope she's our speaker for the next 6 terms so that we can address these issues for our people. But I think at this point, in all fairness, we need to move forward. We should have moved forward yesterday to respond immediately to the needs of our community. And I hope that we will conclude this deliberation shortly once our colleagues have finished their questions and comments and do what we need to do to get the support that we need to get out there to our people. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Senator Brown. Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munoz-Barnes, you're up next.
Situus Masi, Madam Chair, Sen Manana Situus. No questions or comments right now. I just want to take the time to thank all the panel members that were here yesterday and those that have come back this morning. Thank you very much for your continued hard work, and also OMP for staying strong with this effort. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Situus Masi, Madam Vice Speaker. Senator Sabina Paris.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thank you to the panel for being here again. So I guess really, I think what we have to strive for is maximizing the reimbursement, right? And Mr. Fenton yesterday spoke about 75-25 can go up to 90-10 and even 100% if we meet the threshold of $106 per capita. And so I think really it's critical to have the proper, as we all know, the proper documentation in place. And I think this question is to Mr. Esteves, and thank you so much for coming back to Guam, bringing your expertise and your due diligence. It's very critical. So in your experience, what has, I guess this kind of ties into what Senator Barnett was saying, but are you pretty confident that we can maximize the reimbursement?
I'm going to go ahead and say yes, and that's only because of what we've received historically in terms of approved public assistance projects. And I can tell you that when the FEMA Public Assistance Office finally sets up, when we're in the recovery phase of this, they are working to basically say, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered that? So we're not writing the scope of work in a vacuum. It's really a joint endeavor between us and FEMA public assistance folks. Yeah, because sometimes, I can tell you that public assistance program policy guide, it's just 500 some pages, and they have experts in different areas and categories that help us develop these scopes of work. So I can tell you that, yes, from past experiences, they want to help us maximize reimbursement.
And how quickly does a reimbursement occur?
So it really depends on the project, right? So like I said, it could be up to 5 years, especially if it is a more permanent work type of project. We can request for expedited projects, which we have done during COVID. So expedited projects, I think it could be up to, like 6 months to kind of see some of those monies flow. And so the way it works is as soon as we open up the project and we start submitting all the documentation needed, they can start loading the funds. And I also want to state that when we have these approved projects, as soon as it's approved, the funds are actually loaded, but we don't disperse the funds until we actually receive all the documents required to close out the project.
Okay, so you have that added assurance that it's going to pass muster for.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, that's good.
I can tell you that the only thing that will hold us up, and this is going back to Dolphin, there was at least 1 or 2 de-obligated projects only because the agency at the time did not have the funds to complete the project. And I don't have the exact projects off the top of my head. I can get that information, but it goes to show that not having the money to complete the work, we end up losing out on potential reimbursement and additional dollars from FEMA.
So yesterday, Mr. Fenton kind of gave a ballpark figure. I asked him, what do you think it might cost? And he said up to like 400 million. So if we had a 90-10 reimbursement, that would be 40 million coming out from our coffers if we don't get the full reimbursement. So this ballpark number is appropriate, I think.
Yeah, and I just want to, we have to be very realistic that yes, we are going to request for the waiver, but as a planning factor, we should probably stick to the 75-25, and then work towards getting the necessary data to seek that 90-10, potentially 100% cost share.
Okay. And what is the speed of emergency procurement? How quickly do you get the supplies?
So we're able to issue out POs within a day of keying it in, right? But it's a matter of actually awarding it to the vendor, and some vendors, may not accept what we're trying to procure from them, and it's happened. For example, with fuel, we did blanket purchase agreements for fuel, but not every fuel company, they basically didn't want to, or they didn't have the bandwidth for door-to-door delivery of diesel fuel, right? Because they're experiencing their own shortages at their various gas stations. So we can request from these vendors supplies and equipment and services, but not all of them may accept government procurement. Additionally, when trying to procure chainsaws in Saipan, there was one company that says they won't take government POs, they only want credit cards, right? So it's a matter of us working with or working with the private sector to kind of get those supplies and equipment.
Okay, so the utilities are pretty, they know, I guess, overtime, right? They're pretty keyed into how to request for overtime during these emergencies. Have you seen any kind of overtime requests from other agencies besides utilities? And is there a means to, I guess, educate them on how to properly document it so that they can get some sort of assistance?
Yeah, so for example, the utilities, those utility companies will pay overtime. They're responsible for their own overtime and overtime planning. But the guidance that we put out is to ensure that you have to differentiate between what's normal work, right, and what is related to the actual incident response.
Okay, so just to kind of confirm, are all the agencies aware? Should they request overtime for? Because I remember you mentioned earlier that public assistance is given to what is outside of normal operations.
Yeah.
And so the agencies that are seeking overtime for recovery of their facilities, have they been adequately educated so that they get the reimbursement?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and defer to Lester.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Perez. The governor's executive order was very specific about overtime. You have to have worked your 40 hours. You have to submit an overtime plan that got 3 layers of review, mine being the last. I kind of made a statement at a cabinet meeting saying I don't anticipate much out of like entities like my office unless they're up at the EOC. Similarly, you're going to get overtime from Public Works, that's expected, but I need the overtime plan. I need to do cash planning, we need to do all these other things. So it is a requirement of the executive order for the overtime plans to be submitted, and they'll be vetted for appropriateness and funding eligibility, because we're going to be paying those costs. initially from the department to the extent that they can.
Is that in line with potential reimbursement?
Yes.
Okay, great, great. And so yeah, my concern is there's some agencies have leased properties, and so they do have to have cleanup. You know, there's some debris on private properties, but yet it's still government employees working there. So, you know, I do hope that there is outreach to these agencies to ensure that, you know, overtime could be reimbursable, and especially with recovery.
You know, ma'am, honestly, going back to Senator Kanata, if you're in a lease, just hypothetically, if you're in a lease facility that doesn't have power and water, but you've got stuff, bring your people in, have them clean it up. After all, they're unable to do anything else. I mean, you know, I cleared my own road.
And that brings me to another point. So, you know, if the facility is not usable, you know, capacity is an issue out there. Can we redirect some of the government personnel to assist with the recovery efforts? Or is that advisable?
A good example of that, there was a call out for assistance in taking 7,500 meals out of the PD warehouse for distribution. So while there was a number of people that were there, 7,500 meals is quite a heavy lift. So there was a huge amount of response from agencies sending those, you know, saying, I'll send 2 people down, 3 people down, to facilitate, you know, getting those meals out of the warehouse and out into the public. So those kind of things, thank you for asking, because it just happened today.
All right. I guess one more question. So in the bill, it talks about the general fund. So is there a contemplation that it could, you know, dip into the upcoming budget cycle?
It could dip into?
The upcoming budget cycle, the 2024.
2024?
Yeah. Is there enough money in the pot?
I don't believe we're going to be needing this assistance come October.
Okay.
Unless Mr. Esteves comes back, which I have a feeling he'll come back here before October for any supplemental, but I don't believe that we're contemplating revising the budget that OFB is working on to include this effort as it stands right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panel.
You're very welcome, Senator Perez. I believe Senator Joe San Augustine is next, but I think he just stepped out for a minute, so I'll go to Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't see you back there, Senator Kanata. So please, okay, I can see your arm with the thumbs up. Would you like to have any questions to the panel?
No, just want to thank you guys for your service. Keep up the good work and get back to work. Okay. Do what you can as much as you can, and let's haul ass. That's all I can say. Life's going to get back to normal. We just have to be patient. We cannot build an empire overnight. All our houses are in shambles. We are in a recovery state. We're going to get there one day at a time. Your house wasn't built overnight. No one's house was built overnight. Your yard wasn't landscaped overnight. So be patient. The networks out there, they're doing everything they can. They don't work for the government of Guam. So your demands, we're trying to get to each and every one of you. Of course, there's only so much we can do. There's only so much a human being can do. And this is also the reason for all this bureaucratic stuff, because you guys want accountability for everything. Yes, we get it. But in a state of emergency, we also want to get everything done immediately. Right? We also have situations We have people who want access to everything. Well, once upon a time, you want to put your property over here. Well, you didn't give yourself easement. Well, you also planted trees near a power line. You don't maintain the property. We don't have the resources to keep maintaining all of these power lines. It's kind of common sense. But Mother Nature will find its way. So all I'm asking is for people to be patient, do what you can, help out where you can, and let's get back together. Help each other, let's move forward, and literally enough outlet. Because this is not our community standard. Mariana Strong. Saipan's been dealing with typhoons for 21 years. You know, before this typhoon, I kept listening to the Castro Boys, Candy Taman, all the condition 1, condition 2. You know, it's a struggle. I still don't have water, I still don't have power, but we're gonna get through it. We're just not comfortable. People being in the gas lines, we hear you, but we just gotta be patient, hang in there. I know it's easier to say it, but it's really what it is. Just be thankful that you're alive, because things could have been a lot more worse. So carry on and let us know what we can do. You have my commitment to support any and whatever way possible. Again, thank you to all those who are responding, whether you're in the private sector or in the government.
Okay, thank you, Senator Kanata. Senator Joe San Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I'd like to thank the panel that have been here from yesterday and then today. And you know what, on this substitute bill, I'm in full support of this substitute bill. I just believe in one thing, being retired Army's, let's just get her done. Let's quit, I gotta watch the words I use. Let's quit messing around and let's just move forward. Let's just pass this bill and let's move on. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Joe San Augustine. Senator Tom Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you all, I assume you have Substitute Bill 127-37 before you. I have some questions about the bill itself. I don't know to what extent any of you were involved in the drafting. I'm specifically referring to page 1, lines 8 through 11. I guess I'll throw this to Lester, Mr. Carlson first. What is the purpose of this sentence?
Line 7?
Beginning with line 8. Individual assistance is specifically, et cetera.
The individual assistance is specifically authorized for funds appropriated herein, and the governor shall coordinate with FEMA and American Red Cross to compile survey data for individual assistance determinations.
Exactly. So my question, I guess, better phrased is this necessary in the bill, and if so, why?
Mr. Esteves would probably better articulate that I don't believe everybody is eligible under FEMA's individual assistance program, so there might be some gap groups, and there may be a need to take some funds and help those people in those gap groups. But Mr. Esteves could probably shed a little bit more light on that, sir.
Yeah, so for individual assistance, I think we probably need to differentiate between individual assistance that we provide as a government, territorial government, and the FEMA individual assistance program. So FEMA and American Red Cross compile survey data for individual assistance determinations. So that was actually done for the most part. We received our approval for individual assistance from the president. So I think individual assistance in this case seems to be referring to the individual assistance program. However, to leave it in to ensure that we spend funds for individuals requiring assistance would be helpful.
If this sentence were removed, couldn't the governor go ahead and do precisely that anyway?
She can, especially with line 7.
Okay, so in a sense, this is superfluous.
Yes.
All right. The next, I've got to tell you, Lester, I guess, or Mr. Carlson, I guess I'll go back to you. Municipal finance is foggy to me at best. I'm specifically addressing Section 3 on page 2 of the substitute bill. What does this mean, and why is it necessary?
If I'm not mistaken, this was put in to ensure that any FEMA reimbursements for local funds should be immediately deposited into the general fund, and not be subject to any further transfer authority. So if the government of Guam collectively received funding from this act, FEMA reimbursements, that the monies are put back into the general fund, and it may facilitate, a future need for money, or it might be available for appropriation. So the reason why it needs to go back into the general fund is it really should be subject to this body's appropriation authority, because this body authorized it.
Okay, yes, sir, thank you for that response. I believe I do understand that. But why would the governor want that money to be put essentially in a lockbox? Because it's no longer subject to further transfer authority, whereas assuming there never were a typhoon, the governor possibly could transfer those funds. I'm trying to understand why she's segregating this amount of money.
Point of information, Mr. Chair. That's my language. Section 4, yeah, I added that to the language given by the governor. My apologies, I forgot to mention that. So I'm sorry, Section 3 and Section 2, I added to the bill, sub-bill.
May I ask a point of inquiry then?
Sure.
To Speaker Therese, could you explain Section 3 to us?
Yes, well, it's just that to make sure that it doesn't get used for any other purpose, the reimbursements, that they go to the general fund. So this is some money that it's either allocated already to a particular use and we want it to go back there and be used for its original purpose, or money that hasn't been appropriated at all and we want to be able as a legislature to appropriate as we always do.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that response. That did answer my question. Thank you very much.
Senator Typhoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the panel that are here today and those who were here yesterday as well. I think, we're just a couple hours away, maybe to get this bill passed, or even shorter than that. It's something that I think we are all determined to do from day one, is to find that this body, to provide the assistance needed for the administration to move forward, to bring back Guam to a better place, even better than before, maybe, hopefully, but definitely help those who are in desperate need right now, our community. I think that the threshold that was talked about, Mr. Esteves earlier, regarding that amount, can you tell me again what that amount is in order for us to be able to start getting reimbursed?
Yeah, so this is what Mr. Fenton stated yesterday. It's basically $100 to $106 per capita.
What is that?
Actually per person. So whatever the population is of Guam times $100. So if damages exceed that much, then we can.
So we need to come up with how much upfront first, about what?
We need to do the assessments to determine how much damages we've sustained across government facilities, and also how much we're expending for the emergency. And so whatever the total of that is will help to inform whether we are eligible for the waiver. But that's just one route that we can go is meeting that per capita threshold.
Okay.
The other way is any sort of I guess other data that we can provide to kind of inform them that, hey, I know we didn't meet the threshold set forth by, you know, whatever amounts that they have stated, but there are other conditions, you know, that
Okay,
that
let
you
me
need to
simplify
consider.
this for you.
Yeah.
How much do we need to fork out first before we start getting some reimbursement? You said $100
No,
per person times?
Yeah, so for the waiver, whatever the population is times, say, $100.
Okay, so let's say we have 160,000 people on this island times $100
Yeah,
each, so you're looking at $16 million, correct?
yeah.
So we would have to come up, the government of Guam would have to come up with the $16 million, and then anything after that, they will reimburse us?
No, they're already going to reimburse us 75%.
Percent.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's already there.
Okay, that's
Yeah, so it's just requesting a waiver for the 90-10.
the 90/10. Okay, for the waiver. And when will we know about that waiver?
So as we start to spend for this incident, and we start to get more assessments, damage assessments from the government agencies, we'll have a better understanding of that number.
Okay.
And so what Mr. Fenton said yesterday is that the waiver request is probably going to come maybe a month or two down the line.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question I had for Lester is, what assistance is the administration going to give the mayors with regards to helping them with procurement and putting those POs together?
Again, Senator, the Mayor's Council of Guam has staff to be able to get purchase orders out. If they need assistance, technical assistance, you know, the EOC is just, you know, a phone call away.
Okay, thank you, Lester. I'm sure you're going to do what you can after hearing what our president of the Mayor's Council was saying yesterday, that they need help. You know, you can give them the money, but if they don't have any assistance to get these purchase orders out or procurement, you know, it's not going to help them. So I trust that you will ensure that happens. Other than that, I greatly appreciate the time that you all have availed to us, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Typhoon. Madam Speaker, you're the last to comment, amendments, and then we will wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll make that amendment that Lester wanted. I don't have it in writing. It's, if my time could stop, Lester could repeat.
If we could say on line 4, within 30, I mean, I'll go 20, right? 20 days after the end of the month, beginning with May 2023. So we'll report what transpired June 20th for expenditures incurred for typhoon response.
All right, and so to be parallel to the CRER reporting. That would be my amendment, Mr. Chair. I would ask that we do that without putting it in writing and allow legal and the...
Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, the Corps is, in fact, has it written.
Okay.
It's just a matter of now, everyone agreeing to that.
That's my motion.
My colleagues, there's a motion on the floor, the amendment on page 2, line 4. After, let me actually line 3. Within 30, instead of 30, strike that to 20 days after the end of the month. What was the purpose of it?
Beginning with May 2023. So we'll report May June 20th.
But the amendment is specifically within 20 days after the end of the month, beginning on May 2023, correct?
Yeah, beginning with the period of May.
Got it. Are there any objection to that amendment?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I just had a point of inquiry for the author, and it's kind of relative to the reporting requirements. If the author doesn't mind yielding to the question, if it's
Yes.
okay, I would just like to
Madam
ask.
Speaker, state the question first.
Okay,
and then-
are we going to run into a similar situation with some of the other reporting requirements we've had? Because I remember before I was a senator, being in the media, doing many stories about the legislature, being very critical of the amount of information the administration was reporting to the body relative to certain expenditures, whether they be CARES Act or ARP. What we were able to receive from the administration was these reports with basically one line and no detail, no supporting information, no supporting documentation. So I just want to be careful in moving forward with this measure, since we're obligating a huge amount of money, that we're not going to get these reports that are really not reports at all, that are just sheets of paper with lines on them. So is this are
Madam
these reporting
Speaker?
requirements different in this
Madam
bill, ma'am?
Speaker, do you yield
Thank
to
you.
the question?
Well, we tried to add additional detail so that they would have to show, as stated in Section 2, sufficient detail of expenditures to qualify it for federal reimbursement. I don't know. Of course, that's still vague, and I don't want to write a whole thesis on what they need to report, but perhaps we could get their word on it right now. I don't know what else to tell you. We could also, we could always request.
Senator Burnett,
Yeah.
my goodness. Senator Typhoon, you authored the requirement for a more detailed ARP report. We have been providing that every month as required. So you have an expanded update by department, by object category, expenditure, allocation, expenditure, encumbrance, and balance. So each one of these categories, consistent with the budget that Mr. Esteves passed through me for review, which I approved, has that information. So what I had mentioned earlier was that we would probably use that format and then the alphabetical determination of the category. And again, so we will provide that. And as Mr. Esteves mentioned, if you have a question about this, there's no need to FOIA him. Just go ahead and pick up the phone and make their inquiry. But if you see an expenditure that you find questionable, then by all means, at least you know that it was in contractual or equipment or some other type of spending category that might perk your interest. But you will get exactly what it is that Senator Typhoon asked for us to do beginning in this fiscal year. And we added the Mayor's Council as well in the back. So, I mean, I don't know if anybody reads it, but hey, I give it to you.
Is that sufficient, Senator Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any objection to the amendment? Senator Parrish, you have an objection?
No, just a point of inquiry. So
Okay.
I guess is the intent to report monthly? So all the transactions that occurred previous
That's
month
correct.
on the 20th of the following month?
Correct.
So I just want to clarify that.
Yes,
Thank you.
as the amendment reads. Any objection? There being none, motion passes. Madam Speaker, please continue.
Thank you, and I want to thank my colleagues for all their questions and the panel, of course, for their answers. I have a couple more questions. So the whole point for me is we have heard, we live among the people who do not have water, still don't have power, despite, I think, the very extenuous efforts of GWA and GPA. And we heard, I want to know, what is your role, all of your team's role in getting people what they need? We've heard from the mayors. It's like, does the mayor really have to stop what he's doing to go and make sure that we write a purchase order to get a excavator Or are you guys going to get ahead of that and do whatever you're supposed to do to make sure that every village has an excavator? Or are we going to sit around and wait for them to request those things? This is really, I think, the crux of the issue. Why did we wait for FEMA to give us a generator for a water well? I mean, did we not have any generators on Guam? I guess you're shaking your head no. So, but this is my issue, and I'm not gonna go back and say anything about the past. I want you to make it better, and it has to be better. We are willing to give you flexibility, but the leadership has to be better. It has to be proactive. You told us we're following a executive order. It says to follow the 2018 Guam Catastrophic Typhoon Plan. And really what I want to know is this our catastrophic typhoon plan that we are going to wait? For example, the mayors are getting excavators or something from the purchase orders that they submitted on May 22. They got it uploaded yesterday, according to Lester. That's 9 days. And that was a purchase order put in May 22. That's before the storm, right? So are they going to wait 9 days? This is really the crux. And I'm hoping you're going to tell us that's not what we're going to do with this money. We're going to get what we already know because we made a plan that every village needs and GWA is going to need, and we're going to get it out there, and we're not going to wait around any longer. This is the mayor's issue when he says he doesn't want the money because he doesn't want that red tape of purchase orders. You got to go get everybody's approval. You got to wait for whatever days. You got to, and now, you know, Lester, I hear you saying, you said it yesterday too, the mayors have funding already. You know, they had already plans for their ARP money, and so they can use it to make it faster, but I don't agree. I agree with the mayor that we should have had a plan to make sure that after a storm, everybody's got bucket trucks or what do you call those, excavators in their villages and chainsaws. And I haven't heard that at all. It's like you're still gonna wait for the mayors to write purchase orders for chainsaws. Like, can't we get your team of GSA people to write these for them? All they gotta do is call you and say, I need 10 chainsaws, do everything you, and why do they even have to call you? Don't we know? That isn't the plan going to tell us? Yes.
So I could tell you that if there was one recommended policy change, I was talking to Senator Barnett about this yesterday, is the ability to...
Sorry, I was going to introduce that,
okay.
Mr.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, no, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So it's the ability to execute pre-disaster contracts. That way, when we know an event is coming, all we have to do, we don't have to call anyone, we don't have to push any buttons. They execute post-event immediately, whether it's for heavy equipment.
I don't get it, Mr. Esteves. The governor issued an executive order prior to the typhoon hitting Guam. I don't get it.
Yeah, the $250,000 that were given initially for every event, that went quick. State active duty of the National Guard. We only had $9,000 worth of services for heavy equipment. And so the mayors don't write purchase orders. They just tell us that they need X number of chainsaws and they need excavator, heavy equipment rental. But the problem is we went into the weekend and service providers and equipment vendors, they weren't open. And so I think having those pre-disaster contracts are really assist in future events. Additionally, with anything that we buy here, with the monies that you're providing, you know, if we're buying chainsaws, if we're buying generators, whatever we're buying, you know, we're taking those back. Not just so much the stuff that we're giving the mayors, but anything we give to other government of Guam agencies. So we're taking that back and we're putting it into the warehouse that we have leased up in Tamuning. And so I can tell you that some of the stuff that we have from COVID, the Blue Med tents, some of the other equipment that we purchase for COVID response is in the warehouse right now, and that's being utilized for this response. And so, yes, we are going to get more equipment and kind of establish our own distribution center to kind of help us prepare better for future events. And I just got back Tuesday.
All right. GWA did not have generators. They had to wait for FEMA.
They don't have the capacity, the size generators that they needed, and that's why we had to make that request for federal assistance.
We're found out from GWA yesterday that none of this money is going to go to them. It's kind of like what they need is time to fill reservoirs, and they need generators. And that one thing that they needed from the government of Guam, we could not provide them, the generators. And otherwise, their teams are out there doing all the work.
Yeah.
And just like the mayors, their teams are out there doing all the work. I don't understand this just procurement of the National Guard or the activation of the National Guard. I'm getting phone calls in here. The Marine Drive doesn't have any National Guard today. It's like the days, I don't get it.
So they work in tandem with the Guam Police Department to determine what sites are manned, but the priority for the Guard right now is the 24/7 security of debris management sites.
That's a priority.
That is a priority. Second is, this is just for the Guard, is those traffic control points. But within our ESF 13, safety and security, they have the lead on those traffic control points. And you know, maybe there's information that I don't have right now, such as there may be something, some restoration efforts for specific traffic control points, but you know, these types of issues, every day we have probably a different 100 fires to put out because there are some cascading failures that happened during this event that has kind of slowed response. And just let you know, there's a saying in emergency management, if you've seen one disaster, you've seen one disaster, right? Because every single disaster is pretty unique and has their own set of challenges. So I could tell you that we are taking all of this down because there is a comprehensive after-action review that happens after these types of events. And so, you know, when all is said and done and we are in that state of normalcy, you know, it's good that we get back together, revise the plans that we have to ensure that we don't run into the same shortfalls and gaps that we had.
In your plan, who's supposed to help the mayors clear the villages?
So that is DPW for the primary highways, and then the mayors with assistance of DPW within the villages
They're not
themselves.
getting DPW's assistance. Are you in charge of that? Can you make that happen?
So right now, we did ask for Title 10 active duty support, so they are clearing specific asks such as Fonte, Sasa Valley, and so there are requests going in to assist with debris.
Who, the National
efforts.
Guard?
Not the National Guard, active duty military.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
the mayors said this is not how the rest of the typhoon response has been, that they had people in their villages helping them immediately. They didn't have to sit around for 6 days and wait for anything.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate that we went into the weekend to try to call these vendors to execute POs.
So my concern is in the bill, you know, at the request of the governor, there's a 100,000, it says, the governor shall further disperse $100,000 from the funds appropriated herein to each mayor who may utilize such monies for the purposes identified above. You're saying you're going to help them with the procurement of whatever they need, but I also don't want this to be a limit on what the mayors are going to get. We've already known from yesterday that they've calculated I calculated based on their hourly rate that it would take $6,000 a day to rent an excavator. That would use your $100,000 in 16 days.
So
or 16 hours, 16 days, yes.
That's for the mayors, but I can tell you that half of the budget that Lester has given us has all gone for support for the mayors. State active duty of the National Guard.
But they haven't seen the National Guard.
They're at every single debris site.
The debris sites.
Yes.
That's not the mayor's responsibility, the debris site. They want help to clear the debris.
The mayors need the place to put the debris, and so we've given them National Guard support to help with that. Additionally, the National Guard is helping with debris management. They're out there with chainsaws as well. Yeah.
All right, then I want your assurance, Lester, and that the mayors are going to get what they need in addition to this 100,000. That this is for them to use a discretionary funding as fast as they can, discretionary. Even some of these might not be approvable. or reimbursable, right?
Yeah, Mayor Hoffman is texting me.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, time.
Madam Speaker, time is up, and I understand what you're getting at for Lester and Mr. Savis to assure you. Please, wrap up the last statement so we can wrap up the bill.
So Mayor Hoffman, he's meeting with the mayors now, and he's texting me. We were texting earlier, and he's going to give me that long list of whatever gaps they still have. But we're working to provide them with as much resources that they need. And so I wasn't here the first day. I don't know what was said in this body, but I'm in daily contact with the Mayor's Council of Guam to determine what their actual needs are.
What do you mean by Mayor Hoffman?
So Mayor Hoffman is, he's with the mayor's, right, he's the vice president, right,
Right.
Mayor's Council of Guam.
So he's the one communicating with your
Yep.
office? Okay.
Same with Mayor Alec.
Mr. Chair, time.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, we're about to wrap it up.
yes. So
Can
just-
I do my closing remarks?
Yes, make your closing now so we can wrap it up.
All
and
right,
then-
in my closing, I would like to ask you to please watch the video of the mayor in here on day one. Because if we can't respond to the mayor's needs and we're gonna tell them, you've got all the money you need to do your paperwork in order to help the villagers who don't have water, then I just think your plan is a complete failure. And I can't believe that a plan was written to be a failure like that. So I haven't read your 500-page plan, but hopefully the plan is better than what we have seen. So please, I am begging all of you to work together. Lester, I know you want the mayor to use their ARP money or whatever funds they have, but all of that money was for other purposes as well. So, I mean, they could use it, they are using it, they have been resourceful, but I'm begging you guys to get ahead of all of this. People in their houses, get back to that. Get back to how we're gonna help the people in their houses. We're gonna help the mayors get to those people. We're gonna get the guard members in there, the active duty member in there where the houses are first, please.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, time is up.
I am
Just doing closing, just closing. Just about done, Senator Parker. Please continue your closing so we can wrap it up, and then motion to rise. Madam Speaker?
God forbid that we spend one more minute in here. Right?
Go ahead, continue, Madam Speaker. This is not the amendments or anything, this is the closing.
That's correct, Mr.
So continue
I know
on.
what I'm doing. I'm trying to close on the bill. I'm trying to get back to the reason why this is an emergency session. The bill's an emergency bill. The response is not adequate. I think we all agree. I agree that people are doing their best. Some people are doing their best. But I think as a government, we are not doing our best. And that's what I want us to do. That's the reason why we wanted to talk to GWA and GPA and public health. We have shelters that don't have water. But God forbid we spend one more minute talking about it, right? Some of the things in the government that we have seen required, I don't want to bring these people in here. Believe me, I don't want to have to talk to public health about what are we going to do about insulin. They should have it all planned. That's their job. But if we have to talk about it in order to get it done, then please spare one more minute. I say we regroup as a government. We get these people what they need before they have to beg. And I hope that this bill, I asked the governor she said, this bill is going to make things faster. And I said, how will this make it faster when what's making it slow is the purchase orders are taking long? They can't get anything until the purchase orders are done. They couldn't even get excavators in their villages for 6 days. That's just not acceptable to anyone. And so I'm just saying, we can do better than this. And we expect everyone together that we are going to do better than this. Starting today, get them what they need in their villages, get everything GWA needs. If we can help them, help them. Don't wait. And I'm telling you, we ran out of time. I can't talk about it because of our time limits, but I wanted to get some assurance that some of these expenditures, while I trust you guys are going to do your best job, Lester's on it, everybody's on it, that we're going to make sure these are reimbursable if possible, make sure that we, submit all the paperwork necessary. But some of these things may not be reimbursable. And I'm not normally going to say, spend money. But no, I am saying spend money and get these people what they need. Don't let them beg you. Don't let them wait. Don't tell them they need a purchase order to clear their... I just don't like that. It sounds, I'm sorry, I don't even want to be emotional because I'm not emotional, I'm angry. That's an emotion. That's a joke. But anyways, what I'm saying is, everybody's frustrated, but we don't need to be. We need to work better and not be arrogant about it and not be, you got 1 more minute, that's all? That's probably what they're telling the mayors too. I'm just saying, can you just hear them? They are working hard as they can. Yeah, you might not like them, you might not like how they spend their money, but then do it better if you think you can do it better. Get other people out there to assist these families who are trapped in their homes. Get other people out there to give them water. Just let us do it. We know we've made plans and plans for decades of how to respond to catastrophic typhoons. So please, I didn't have time to get into your catastrophic plan and whether we are really following it, because I cannot imagine that this is the best that our plan could do for us. And I'm so grateful, and Mr. Chair, that I'm very grateful for all the work that has been done. And I don't want to discount that. I just want to say we need to coordinate better. Give them, these people on the front lines, give them what they need as fast as we can. And I just hope that this bill does this, that it makes it faster. She said it's going to be faster because she will be able to load the 50 million in and you will be able to approve these purchase orders faster as opposed to waiting to find the money and all of that. I wanted to ask where the $3.5 million came from, Mr. Chair. Maybe you could just inform us of that. But otherwise, thank you for your work. And thank you, colleagues, for your patience in dealing with this bill and this emergency session. Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker, you have a motion to rise?
I move to rise. I move to rise with the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole to send Bill number 127-37 as substituted on the floor and further amended on the floor to the third reading.
On that motion, are there any objection? There being none, motion passes. Madam Speaker, we are now in recess.
Administrative Legislature in GUÅHAN is back from recess. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to report back to the body after deliberation on Bill 127-37 COR as substituted and as amended in the Committee of the Whole, with a recommendation to the Committee of the Whole to place on the third reading file.
On that motion? On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Madam Speaker,
Senator San Augustine.
I move that, notwithstanding House rules, is that we move to vote on Bill 127-37 COR as substituted without engrossment.
On the motion to vote on Bill 127-37 COR without engrossment, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator Shelton, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move to go back to motions for the purpose of placing Bill number 129-37 LS, an act to add a new section 8A to Part 2 of Chapter 13 of Public Law 36-107, the General Appropriations Act of 2023, relative to prioritizing fiscal year 2023 general fund revenues for a post-Typhoon Mawar financial assistance program for Guam families. And for those who are watching, this is a bill introduced by myself yesterday with Senator Kanata, Senator Parkinson, and Senator San Nicolas to provide a one-time payment of $500 to individuals.
On the motion to go back to motions, is there any objection?
Madam Speaker, is this a motion to go back to motions, period, without putting any bill on the agenda? Is that the motion?
That's correct.
Okay, Madam Speaker, I would have to object. Thank you.
On the motion to go back to motions, there's been an objection. All in favor of going back to motions, please raise your hand. Motion fails. All right, we have now exhausted the second reading file. We will move to the third reading file. We have nothing in the voting file. So on the third reading file, there was a motion to vote without engrossment. Clerks, please, we are on bill number 127-37 COR, as substituted on the floor and further substituted by the Committee of the Whole. Clerks, please read the title.
Bill number 127-37 COR, as substituted and as amended on the floor, introduced by Therese M. Terlaje. An act to authorize MAGA'HÅGAN GUÅHAN to utilize up to $50 million from the general fund for emergency response expenses in response to Typhoon Mawar.
Roll call.
Senator Barnett. Senator Barnett, aye. Senator Blas. Senator Blas, aye. Senator Brown. Senator Brown, aye. Senator Dueñas. Senator Dueñas, aye. Senator Fisher. Senator Fisher, aye. Senator Lujan. Senator Lujan, aye. Vice Speaker Muña Barnes. Vice Speaker Muña Barnes, aye. Senator Parkinson. Senator Parkinson, aye. Senator Perez. Senator Perez, aye. Senator Kanata. Senator Kanata, aye. Senator San Augustine. Senator San Augustine, aye. Senator San Nicolas. Senator San Nicolas, aye. Senator Shelton. Senator Shelton, aye. Senator Titagui. Senator Titagui, aye. Speaker Terlaje. Speaker Terlaje, aye.
Bill number 127-37 COR, as substituted on the floor and further amended in the Committee of the Whole, received 15 ayes and is duly passed by this body. That exhausts our consideration of the daily file. We are now in brief extension of remarks. Is there anyone who'd like to be recognized under brief extension of remarks? If not, are there any announcements? And if not, Majority Leader Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move to adjourn today's session, subject to the call of the Speaker.
On the motion to adjourn today's session, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Sidus Masi, colleagues.